Okay, so we will start. Okay, so you remember a little bit what is the purpose of this series of lecture, to try to see the challenge of the painters, how they succeeded to express themes that apparently have no relation, but must be difficult to do, like speech or movement or time. And today we will deal with emotions, or as it was expressed, let's see, for instance, in the 17th century, they were speaking of passions instead of emotion, but it's quite close to what we mean by this. And right away, you have two attitudes in the 17th century about this problem, say how to express passions in a picture. You have people like Roger de Pile. This is a very important theoretician at the time. He was the head of the Rubenians, meaning people who attach more importance to color than to line. And they were against the Poussinistes, the follower of Poussin. And Poussin, of course, the drawing is very important and the idea that you want to express. So they were two schools, if you want, one insisting on color and the other on drawing. And for instance, de Pile says it's impossible, in fact, to really codify the expression of emotion. See, you cannot give rules for that. It's each painter should find his own way, should study human nature and try to be as natural as possible, and that's it. And others says, for instance, Philibien says at the time that, okay, you have to take in consideration the role of the person that you are representing. A queen doesn't express sadness like a peasant. And so then right away he introduced inside of the same emotion, let's say sadness, a possibility of gradation according to the importance of the person. And you have others, like you will see today, I will show you some example of that, of like Charles Lebrun, in the contrary, created a whole system in which you say, if you want to express joy, you should draw the eyes that way, you have a smile and everything. So in a very codified way. And okay, for joy it's easy to understand, but let's say, how do you represent admiration, astonishment? How do you make the difference between both? And so he was very precise on that, and of course of the opposite camp than Roger de Pile, who says, no, we cannot give rules, you have to follow your intuition. And what was, because of the situation of unclear, how we should proceed and all that, you have certain anecdotes that were told about the secret of this painter and that one, how he proceed, you know. And for instance, I will show you a few of them. This is Domenico Zampieri, who is called also, in French, this is Le Dominicain or Dominicain, or, I wrote there. And he had a problem here of expression, different emotion along this crowd here, because it's since Cecilia who decided to empty her cupboard, you know, and throw away all your old clothes and things like that. So she's on the top there distributing, you see, and then of course creating a lot of havoc among the people. Some likes what they got and some don't like it. Kids try to step one above the other to be able to reach her and to get the prize that she's giving. It's a little bit, in fact, it's terrible in a way. It's like me, the rich one, I give you my whole clothes and manage with them as much. But you see, if you look at the faces, he tried to express different emotion, and not always very successful. We were told that his trick was to try to mimicry himself the emotion in question that he wanted to represent. He says, if you don't leave it yourself from inside, you will not be able to express it the right way. And so, for instance, Carracci tells the story that he wanted to show somebody who scorned another one with evilness. And so he was trying to make a very ugly face, you know, to leave it from inside and then try to draw it as best as he could. The same is true of Bernini, so a great sculptor, that wanted to represent David here in this famous scene in which he's throwing a stone on the head of Goliath and win the battle between the two. So we are told that Bernini was looking at a mirror of his face to see, okay, suppose I am throwing a stone to somebody, how I will look, which kind of face I will do. So the mirror was used for that. And again, this idea, I want to live the thing, to feel it myself, but I want also to see what is happening in the face that had this emotion. So that was another solution. This painter of the 17th century, Samuel Hoogstraten, speak also of the mirror. And exactly with this opposition between what you feel inside, you should be able to see it in a mirror, and then to be able to imitate it and do it. If I tell you that he's a disciple of Rembrandt, you will have no problem with this. It's really a good disciple, very close to his master, and it's a young man. And what he did, he made a self-portrait of himself in front of a mirror, of course, and try to depict what he sees. The idea of using mirror and trying to find the interior, what you live and what you feel from inside, and then what it looks outside, of course, comes from Rembrandt himself. And Rembrandt has done it in a very interesting fashion because he decided to make faces like we said in English, to make a face. And there's a whole collection of them. I just show you two, but there's probably 10 of them, in which he's in front of a mirror and decide to have an angry look or to have wide open eyes, and in order to be sad and try to catch like this in a very small little drawing. Now, of course, it's enlarged tremendously, but in reality, they are very small, almost like a stamp. And so he could draw this rapidly and look at him and make face in front of the mirror and then make a series of these things. We thought that it will be interesting. I'd say art historians try to find sources and things like that. So we tried to find in his own picture some of these faces or this expression, let's say. And it doesn't seem to be the case. I think he just did it for the fun of it. Maybe it's a little bit narcissistic. You see, you look at yourself in a mirror, and then you create personages like that, and you are amused by it. And the other problem, of course, also, it is how to fix an expression like this. See? You are looking in a mirror, okay, for 1 second, you laugh, and then suddenly you have to work, you have to make your drawing, so you lose this expression. And it's not sure that you will find it again exactly like it was. These people had no photography to reassure them on the way to proceed. Today, of course, we could have a reference with photographs, and the perfect example of that is this series of photography done by, not by him, but used by him, by Paul Ekman, who is an anthropologist, and he wants to demonstrate that these expressions that you see there were, say, the photograph of American people, but you can show them in any culture and people will recognize what it is. So if you look on the top, on the left, she's angry girl. Nobody will doubt that it's anger. And the other one, that is surprise or astonishment or something. In the middle also, no, the other one on the top is fear. Somebody who's afraid of something. In the middle, on the left, is surprise, I would say, and then joy. And then finally, in the bottom, I see some of you make faces. It's perfect. It's exactly what you should do now to understand what it is. You look like this, and then you realize this is disgust. And the other, she's sad. So these kind of basic emotion that we could use like this, say in a test, if you want, situation where even people of very different culture could always recognize exactly what it is. As if we're not dealing here with a cultural factor, but with a kind of universal type of expression that is typical of human. Animals will not do that. This is typical of human. For instance, animal will grin like they show their teeth, and so, and when we show our teeth, we are rather happy. We are laughing. So you will have a completely difference like that. So for let's say a modern artist, this problem of expression is not linked to the hierarchy in which you are. Say if you are a king or a peasant or something, it's not important, because in any circumstances you will be able to recognize them, and also the fact that there will be infinitely little nuance. You see, that will be very difficult to codify. In the contrary, we have the impression that right away we can have type defined enough that people will recognize them right away. And like I said, the one in the 17th century will try to make really a theory of that and really present, I would say, a system how to express emotion, was Charles Lebrun. And you see him here in the studio by a painting by Nicolas de Largillière, a colleague, of course, and Lebrun is the head of the Academy at the time, very well received by the king. And indeed, if you look in the portrait of Largillière in the back, you see one of his paintings that I show you a detail of it. And the detail, of course, who you think is there is Louis XIV. What is represented is Louis XIV. So Largillière put in his painting another painting of Lebrun in which he shows that he's close to the king and he can make his portrait like this, even in a kind of symbolic fashion, but nevertheless, it gave us an idea of the importance of the man. He's with the Academy and all that, and he, contrarily to Roger de Pile that I was mentioning before, he thought now that we can organize a system, and he's, in terms of philosophy, he's a Cartesian. He's a disciple of Descartes. And he referred to him. He referred to his system. I will just read you a little bit the basis of his system, why he thinks that he can do it. He said, if it is true that there is one interior part where the soul exercises its function most immediately, and that this part is in the brain, then we may also say that the face is the part where it makes its feeling most apparent. That's interesting. There could be a correspondence between the fact that we have a brain and the fact that we have a face, or a visage, if you want. And he says why it's not in the chest or in the legs and all that. It is because it's related to the brain in a certain way. And he continued, and as we have said that the gland, which is in the middle of the brain, so this is a kind of crazy theory, but it was defended by Descartes. He says, when you look at the brain, everything is double, except in one little place in the middle, you have one gland, what we call hypophysa, and that at the time they call pineal gland. And so if this one was unique, it must be very important. So for Descartes, this was the place where the soul and the body meet, really. And so a passion or an emotion could be expressed from there and then transmitted to the face. And look what is the conclusion of Lebrun. He says, if there is in the middle of the brain, in the place where the soul receives the image of the passion, so the eyebrow is the part of the face where the passion are best distinguished. Because since this little gland, if you want, is at the middle, above that level in the brain, so he says we should look at the eyebrow of people to see what they feel. If they are angry, the elbow will have a certain shape. If they are happy, they will go up. And he says this is the key because it's linked to this little gland that is in the middle of the brain where the soul and the body meet. This is a very, say, for instance, if you look at Descartes' work itself, like this is an engraving that from illustrating one of his books, in which he tried to explain, you see, the perception of, he put an arrow there, and also you have the two eyes, but instead of representing them from profile, it is as if you were looking at them from above. And then the two eyes goes inside of the brain, And in the middle there, you have this little gland, well, it's quite big there, with an H on it, hypophysa. And so he says, when somebody looks at whatever, an arrow or something, and want to take it, well, the hypophysa will send a message, and you will have an explanation of the movement of the hand. Autrement dit, the relationship between brain and movement and perception is not clear. It's not like we will do today, but they are on the way. They begin to feel that there must be a relationship there. So that gave an immense importance to this little gland, who in fact have nothing to do with that. I think it's responsible of the endocrinian system and is not responsible. But since it was unique, they thought it was very important. Since you have two lobes and two visual area and two this and two that, and only one was unique, it must be the key of everything. And therefore, the eyebrows were studied carefully by Lebrun. And you have drawings that he made in which you see only the eyes and the eyebrows, and if you look at each one, you will see they express different things. As if this is really the key of expression. If we could observe well the eyebrow, we will have a system in which we could distinguish, let's say, between astonishment and anger without problem. And from there, he made a series of drawings like this one, in which you have lines and things and structured. It's a code. It's something that is very defined, in which, for instance, astonishment will be, if you want to express a face with astonishment, you should follow the rules here. You should have the mouth at that level, and the eyebrow should be a little bit up. And it will give suddenly a model for the painter to follow if they want to express this emotion in particular. And say, for instance, here, you have an application of it. Somebody will be astonished and even admiring something, well, could take advantage of the profile that you have on the left there and try to put it in a real face, let's say, and to express it. And admiration, by the way, is one of the very important emotion for the Cartesian, again, for Descartes, because he says it's the first emotion. The only one where you don't have an opposite. For instance, joy will be opposite to sadness, but admiration to well. He says if you have nothing to admire, you have no emotion. You just are indifferent to it. So he says that must be an important feeling, since it is, again, unique. So he starts with this. The text of Descartes on this, it's in the what he called the Traité des Passions, the treatise about passions, and he gives an immense importance like this to admiration. He said, when the first encounter of any object surprises us, and we judge it to be new or far different from what we know before, or from what we suppose it should have been, we admire it. When we're in front of something that we have never seen before, we are surprised and we have this reflex of admiration. And he says this is why it's so important, passion, because it's the discovery of newness and of opening to different things. And because this may fall out before we know at all whether the subjects be convenient or not, methinks admiration is the first of all the passions, and it has no contrary. This passion have no opposite, have no contrary, because it is the object presented have nothing in it that surprises us. See, if you are in front of something that banal or not interesting, he says we are not a whit moved at it, and we consider it without passion. We have no reaction to it. And so you see a little bit, that's very different from what Roger de Pille was suggesting. Follow your instinct, have intuition about it and all that. Now, no, in the contrary, we have a codification, and we have, for instance, advice given to artists how to proceed. Okay, sadness, okay, you see how the eyebrows are very different now, and how the eyes should be half closed and all that. And indeed, when you read the text of, that accompanied this drawing, you have the tendency to make the face like he tells you to do. Say, put your eyebrows down, and suddenly you feel, you feel the sadness because you play it in a way. Huh? You follow his, and the opposite, of course, is what he calls here le rire, or laughter, if you want, and in which everything goes in the other direction. Huh? So you will have this codification of passion, and to my surprise, there is some modern artists who are going back to this subject. And one who is very important is Bill Viola. I don't know if you saw some of his video and things. It's always very interesting. And he did, for instance, he asked an actor to do these passions one after the other. And this is presented on a kind of flat plasma screen. So it's, and you look at it, and then suddenly you realize that they are changing slowly. It's the same guy, of course, that is presented 6 times, but let's say on the top he starts by being laughing, and then suddenly he becomes less happy, and then suddenly he becomes sad, so he changed. But all the others do the same. So you look at it, it takes probably 20 minutes before you realize that these faces are changing very slowly, like they photograph in very slow motion, and that in a way it makes you feel all the intermediary between one feeling to the other. So it's exactly the same problem that Lebrun had at the time, but done with the modern category, modern technique, let's say, like video and things like that. No. Bill Viola. This is, again, the same thing. This is a video in which I just show you 2 scenes, but it's called the greeting. So it's 2 ladies meeting, a little bit like in representation of the visitation. When Mary goes to Elizabeth and they meet each other. And so the video is, again, very slow moving. So you see all the intermediary between, let's say, the video on the left and the one on the right. You see how the faces will change from, who are you? Oh, I recognize you. We do it in 1 second, but in the video it's very, very slow. You see all the intermediary between one and the, and in this case, he got his inspiration from that painting of Pontormo, as if he wanted to make a video from it. And the third, I just took 3 still, but you should say the normal way to see it. You see it in movement. You see it as it happened. But it's not. It's a video again that will last probably up to 20 minutes. It will not be short, even if it's what is represented. It's just an encounter. He says, I wanted to show what the painter of the past could not do, all the intermediary between one feeling to the other. That you could see all the gradation between both. And this is interesting because even in very contemporary artists working with the means of today, you do have the same type of preoccupation. Okay, this is end of my introduction. Now let's deal with some Canadian stuff. The problem where you will have to know about emotion and to be able to express them clearly, I would say there's 2 big sectors in which the problem have to be solved. The first one is from religious picture. When you have a scene of, let's say, Jesus on the cross and with Mary at the bottom of the cross and being sad and things like that, you have to know how to express that, otherwise you would be ridiculous. And so that's one sector. And the other one is history. When you want to make an historical scene, where there is interaction between actors, you have also to be clear about what they feel one about the other. For instance, if they are enemies or if they are fighting on the battlefield and all that, the expression should be right. So I will show you an example of both. Some religious picture in which the problem of emotion is stress and how it was solved, and then also a few historical examples. And later on, I don't tell you right away, but I will have a conclusion with more modern stuff that's closer to us. First of all, okay, this idea of religious theme, and with a very emotional scene, if you want, where evidently the passion of the personage should be quite clear. This is done by Antoine Plamondon. Okay, Plamondon was active in the 19th century, very sure of himself. He's a painter of Quebec City, and but this painting here was supposed to be one station of the Way of the Cross. For the non-Catholic, I just explained you, we traditionally in churches, we have 14 scenes representing the way that Jesus was condemned and finally hanged on the cross, and then the deposition from the cross, and then put in a tomb where he succeeded to rise from the dead, and he's now on the top there somewhere on the cloud, very happy, everything finished well. This idea of 14 stations, I remember in my childhood we used to go, then you have to kneel in front of one and je vous salue Marie pleine de grâce, to say that as fast as possible and then to go to one to the other. So Plamondon was hired to make these 14 pictures, they're quite big, they are quite big, for the Church of Notre Dame here in Montreal. So he's a Quebec painter, but then he got a nice commission in Montreal, so he's very excited by it. And he decided that 7 stations will be enough. Why to make 14? And this was not very well accepted by the Sulpician, les messieurs de Saint-Sulpice, that ordered him. And they said, you have to finish your Way of Cross. And then Plamondon began to say, there's nothing in the scripture that could justify all these scenes, you know. It's not written, and my representation is close to the gospel, and it should be accepted as such. So finally, he lost his contract because the priest didn't accept it. And so what to do with these he made few of them. What to do with this big painting? They end up here in this museum, finally. So we have them in the Musée des Beaux-Arts, in the Museum of Fine Arts of Montreal. And, okay, so they are interesting now, rather like, I would say, just painting and detached from this religious context. But you have to know a little bit how it was. Here, it's evident, say, if you see the main personage, who is the Virgin Mary on the right there, with this gesture like this and looking toward heaven, that she expressed a kind of resignation in front of what happened to her son, who is lying on the ground there, and with the people having just detached them from the cross. So it's a very kind of dramatic type of situation, except that in this case, we know where Plamondon took his inspiration. And because we know what he copied, in fact, the problem of translating emotion in painting was not too hard for him, because it was already done by somebody else. Look at that. So here, in Saint-Maclou, in Pontoise, so in France, you have this painting on the wall that I show you on the right, in which, evidently, is the source of Plamondon. It's exactly the same thing, except that with Plamondon, since he wanted to have a big rectangular painting that will be hung in all over the church like this, like the Station of the Cross, there, in the contrary, it's just an altar piece, a picture that you put above an altar, and is more narrow, but it's the same, exactly the same personage and the same way to represent them. And then, what is curious here, it is which kind of sources that Plamondon had to make his painting. Did he go to Pontoise and to the Cathedral of Saint-Maclou? I'm not sure, because that could have been the solution. You go where the real painting is, and you put your canvas there, and you copy what you see. Alors normally, in situations like when it's a Canadian who wants to make a painting of that nature, that he wants to copy some famous master like Jean Jouvenet, he will use an engraving. And indeed, there exists some engraving of this painting, But like in any engraving, what's happening, it is when the engraver makes the drawing and then print it, the image is reversed. And you can see here, if you see the Virgin Mary on the right, pass on the left in the engraving. But when you go back to the painting of Plamondon, it's like the painting. It's not like the engraving. They have in the same organization, and not only that, the color is the same also. So then again, it says, oh my God, this is really, should we go to the documents, and to find that indeed Plamondon went to Pontoise, no, he didn't have to do that, and you will see why. There is in Oka, a little church, it's called the Annunciation, in which they had a copy, unfortunately I have only a black and white bad photo, a copy of the Jouvenet picture that is in France, done probably by a Frenchman and sold here. So that's a painting that Plamondon could look at. And of course, this one, done in France by an unknown author, we don't know who did it, was probably done in front of the real thing. And that's why Plamondon then could have exactly the same order and the same presentation between the two things. And this is not the end of the story. The painting was in the Annunciation that I show you there, was in fact installed in Près d'Oka, on the, you have the Lac des Deux Montagnes, the two mountain lakes, how do you call it in English? And there is a little hill there. And on the top of the hill, there was little chapel there, one beside the other, in which they put this painting for making a kind of procession there. The people went, and they thought it would be very educational. You make prayers and things like that, and you open this little chapel and you see a real painting. But then they realized that this was not a good idea to left painting there in the winter and things like that. They were exposed to the weather, the bad weather. So they decided to put them in the church instead. So that's why they have been saved up to today, but they are now in the church. But then to replace what was in this little chapel on the top of the hill there, they asked a sculptor to do a reproduction of it. Unfortunately, these sculptures were vandalized relatively recently, in something like 1970 or something like that. The criminals were never found. We don't know what was their motivation, but evidently here, with the little who is left of it, you see that the sculptor, Gernon de Belleville, has imitated the picture that he had before, that they had. And he tried his best to transpose it in sculpture. And in fact, in a way, I think it's much more interesting work of art than the Plamondon copy. If you compare both, you see here it seems the challenge is different. You have to show a three-dimensional thing. But unfortunately, it's very almost destroyed. We have a photo of the sculpture before the vandalization, but again, it's a black and white, not very clear photo, done in '67, but it shows that nothing had been broken. And we don't know why these people did that. It's very ridiculous. It could be just a little bit too much pot, I don't know, whatever the reason that happened. So it's a kind of complex story, but you see, for religious painting, one of the key, of course, to find how to express things was very often to find a master who did it before you and to copy it as better as you want. One of the things, you notice that the Virgin Mary in this painting is looking like that, see? Like if her eyes were looking at heaven. And this is a thing that's interesting that Charles Lebrun says, this is peculiar to human. Animals cannot do that. Well, my dog do it. So that was a mistake. But each time you eat, this thing goes like this and look at you. No. But he thought that will be typical of human. You see, praising his God and things like that. But So it's one part of the picture of Jouvenet, of course, and of Plamondon and of Garnon d'Iberville, to have stressed this aspect. But again, in Lebrun, you have the impression that they have these models, they have these rules to follow, and they applied it in many, many pictures. Look, another example very similar to that, but done by another artist, Jean-Baptiste Regnault, in which, well, this is at the Louvre, but it was probably done for the church first, in which you find almost the same type of character, the same type of gesture, the look toward heaven also of the Virgin and blue, and as if it's almost stereotyped because there's so many of them, and you need it in so many churches that finally you have a very narrow scope, let's say, to do it. Another example done also by Plamondon, it is, you will see, again a copy, but then much more complicated here, let's say, with many personages and all that, and Christ being not yet on the ground. And a descent from the cross, okay? But after Pierre-Paul Rubens, or Peter Paul Rubens, if you want in English. So I will show you, that's one example that he did for l'Hôtel-Dieu in Quebec, and he did another one for a church, a Saint-François-de-Sales in Neuville. So for a religious painter, this is kind of good, you know. You have a series of parishes that want to have the same thing exactly, and they pay you accordingly, and then you just repeat the same thing all the time. And in this case, he followed a very famous model, who is this famous altarpiece, triptych, at the Cathedral of Our Lady in Antwerp, in Belgium, and where Rubens galore. It's a fantastic presentation in three sections. You have the visitation on the left that we just spoke about. You have the descent of the cross from the cross in the middle, and you have the presentation in the temple on the right. Three subjects very popular and easy to read at the time by the people. When you look at the Plamondon picture, they look like this one. They are oriented the same way. But the color is not right in Plamondon. Look, for instance, the body of Christ here is almost green, livid. If you go back to the Plamondon, it's more warm in color. It's like more close to life, if you want, in both pictures. Also, even if these reproductions are not perfect, they are taken from books, you have certain difference in the color of the vestment of the people there when you compare to Rubens. This is already, when the color doesn't fit, this is already an indication that there must be an engraving, because the engraving is black and white. It doesn't give you the key of the color. If you have not seen the painting, you could invent whatever color. Mind you, there's some colors are traditional, like for the Virgin to be in blue. This is almost impossible to avoid. If you put it in yellow, everybody will laugh at you. Yeah, there is a certain codification of color, but not for everybody. Not for the guy who removed the nails from Christ and things like that. In this, they could invent more. So then the hypothesis of an engraving there for Plamondon is almost impossible to avoid. And indeed, there is a famous engraving of this deposition from the cross, who's done by Lucas Vosterman, and in which the image is reversed. So, but in Plamondon, they are like in the altarpiece of Antwerp. But here we are dealing with a so famous picture that not only there was one engraving, but there was engraving done from the engraving, and there's a whole tradition like that. So probably the image flipped one like this, and Plamondon got one was rightly oriented by hazard. The famous one, the more famous one is this one. The Vosterman is very subtle, very well done. And when you think in concretely how they were doing it, they were not, the engraver were not working in front of the picture habitually. See, for instance, to go to the Cathedral of Antwerp and to be sitting there in front of it. They were, in fact, using what we call a modello. This is the painter, Rubens, for instance, will give them a sketch of it. And so from that, they will build the main picture, if you want, and then they could go back to check some details and all that. It was not done just in front of the picture. So a great engraver like Wassermann could really make a transposition of the painting, which is very convincing, and in which you have, but others who are less good, you see they will introduce already differences at that level. So it's very possible. The other subject possible is history. You could have, like I say, a religious theme, but you could have also historical theme in which you will need to express emotion. And right away, any French Canadian will remember this famous scene of Frontenac. Frontenac was the governor of New France, and he was visited by Sir William Phips, which is, of course, an English captain, wanted to conquest Quebec. And he told him, my dear sir, he said, before I will give you Quebec, I will shoot you with my cannon. Je vous répondrai par la bouche de mes canons. Bon. Alors that's, if you go in Quebec City now, and you go to the Parliament, and you will have in the facade of the Parliament, you will have niches like this in which you have a lot of statues representing famous people of the history of Canada. And one is devoted to Frontenac. So I show it to you on the left in this niche, and then separated, let's say, on the right, to see a little bit how it looks. And this was a big commission, of course, of this Louis-Philippe Hébert, who is a sculptor of many monuments. For instance, here in Montreal, the Maisonneuve monument is done by Louis-Philippe Hébert. Say the one who is in front of the Notre Dame Church in Place d'Armes, in this region. And very well known. The sculpture was done in bronze in Paris, of course, because we didn't have big enough foundry, let's say, to do it here. So he worked in Paris, and he bring it back in time for putting it the right place on the Parliament. And then the problem of Hébert is the same problem that the painter had. So which kind of face I will give to Frontenac, telling the messenger of Phips that he will answer him back by the mouth of his cannon. And if you go a little bit closer to it, you see that the complexity of the choice of Hébert, say, how to create this idea of indignation, of wrath, and also of assurance. He's very sure of himself. Bussy Rabutin used to say, if there is one person in France that cannot be intimidated, it is Frontenac. He was scared of nothing, and he was a soldier for all his career and all that. He was wounded also. So to succeed to express that, I think that Hébert had the same problem like the painter that we were looking before, except now the range of emotion or passion, if you want, is rather close to anger, to indignation, to challenge. And if you go back to Lebrun and you put in parallel, let's say, the face of Frontenac, and you look at this series of eyebrows, you will find that Hébert could have took inspiration for one of them to make the eyebrows of this personage. And then, on the contrary, anger, as represented by Lebrun, is almost caricatural. And it's more subtle, I would say, in the Hébert picture. So it's less just a caricature of anger. Sometimes that's one of the problems of Lebrun. Say, he wants to have such a clear image of what the emotion will be, that sometimes he goes up to almost a caricature, like a cartoon in a way. And so there you have another representation of Lebrun, who is maybe a little bit closer of anger also. And Lebrun described, of course, all the effect of anger on a face in very detailed fashion and all that. It's not necessary that I read to you, but again, it's the same thing. It's he tried to analyze the eyebrows, how the grin and everything, say which kind of face you will make if you are threatened like this, or if you want to show angers. And so, when angers fills the soul, he who feels this passion has red and inflamed eyes. Okay, so the sculptor cannot do that, of course, because it's in bronze. But the pupil restless and shining. The eyebrows now lowered, now raised. And I was reading that, and I was doing exactly that, and I became very angry at my wife. Joking. And, okay. The popularity of this image of Frontenac done by Hébert is immense. For instance, Louis Jobin did a copy of it, well, almost a copy of it, if you want, the one you see, the statue that you see on the left. He did it also in ice. Okay? During the Carnival in Quebec, you have the ice sculpture. It's still done. But Jobin did that at the time, and he did Frontenac like that with his cannon in ice. It's not a very good idea because the cannon is very hot. The whole thing will melt. But anyway, he did that. And then he produced these three sculptures for the Sherbrooke Seminary. They are installed now. On the top, you see only one there. One is Frontenac, one is St. Charles Borromeo, which is the patron of the seminary. And the third one, I don't know what he's doing there, it's Lord Elgin. So it's a funny distribution of character there. And so now they have been put in bronze. They were sculpted first in wood because Jobin was a wood sculptor. And they are being transposed in bronze and put on the top of this not too beautiful building, but whatever. And okay, so you see that was one solution to work on the face and to try to really express something. There are other representations of the same scene, more, let's say, more complex a little bit, more closer to painting, done by this man, Charles William Jeffreys. Jeffreys has been an illustrator rather than a painter, I think, that was very used for a history of Canada and books like this. For instance, textbook in class. You have many textbooks who are in fact illustrated by Jeffreys. So now he wants to represent exactly the same scene that I was describing through Hébert. Alors you see Frontenac in blue there on the right, and he just received the messenger, the Lieutenant Savage, come from the ship of Admiral Phipps. And he was blindfolded. You see on the left side, you have a man in blue there, that old piece of cloth. So he was blindfolded not to know exactly where he was. In fact, he brought them in Chateau Saint-Louis, or in the middle of Quebec City. And this messenger of Phipps, thought to be clever, he says, you have to surrender Quebec to my captain, to my chief, and I give you 1 hour to give me an answer. And he put his watch on the table. So you see it a little bit there between them. And the answer of Frontenac was, of course, you don't have to wait so long. I will tell you. I will answer you with the mouth of my cannons. Je vous répondrai par la bouche de mes canons. Vous n'avez pas à attendre 1 heure. We don't need 1 hour to decide that. And in fact, finally, they succeeded to push back the Phipps people and stay. Alors, so Jeffrey tried to imagine a scene like this where everybody have a role exactly. One of the problems of these representations, we know that Frontenac, in fact, in reality, was wounded with his right arm during a battle. And so he could not make this wonderful gesture. You see both in the sculpture and in the sculpture he's pointing the cannon like this, and here he's going like this. That he could not do. In fact, in reality, he was completely lame with one of his arms. And so a historian, of course, have picked on this. There's a little defect here and defect there, but for the imagery, let's say, of the imagination of people, I think this picture was very efficient as it is. But you see, again, the problem of historical type of painting will bring you to the problem of expression, to show in the face of Frontenac that he's angry, that he have an answer to give them. I think it's a good example of that. Sometimes we have engravings who are difficult to explain in those terms. And my favorite example is this one. It's the representation of the martyrs of Canada. There are 7 of them, I think. 7 is always a good number for martyrs also. And so Father Brébeuf and Father Lallemand were executed, let's say, by the Iroquois, whatever happened. Grégoire Huret, who did the engraving, is a French engraver, is member of the Academy with Lebrun, and he must have heard Lebrun telling about the story, how to express the passion and all that. And you look at this, and everybody seems okay. See, the guy who are cooked wait patiently that it's over, and the Indian doesn't seems too angry. They pour the hot oil on them, and it's like very matter of fact. It's very strange in which you have a scene in which the emotion should be at the extreme of anger on one side and of pain on the other side. There, everything seems to be very quiet, very without too much problem. As if Monsieur Huret was not a good student of Monsieur Lebrun when he explained how to express passion. And indeed, Lebrun himself have previewed, you see, the problem of representation for pain, depiction of pain, what he called en haut, la douleur aiguë, so that means a very sharp pain, and the other, douleur de l'âme et du corps, of the soul and of the body. So at least he could have used this for the 2 fathers who are tortured in the foreground. No. Alors, of course, I said probably others have done this in a much more dramatic fashion. And I went to this Jeffrey that I showed you before, and indeed, here is the extreme opposite, in which if you see the faces of the Iroquois there, they all look very angry and very mean and all that. And the priests are suffering. He tried to express all this, but almost in a racist way, in fact. The Indian, if we understand well what it was, they had a real problem after the contact with the white with the spread of sicknesses because of the immunity system. Were not prepared to all the sickness that we had in Europe at the time, and even of today if you want. And so there were a lot of people dying. And he decided to make a sacrifice, to kill few of these Jesuits in order to be protected by their God against this terrible thing. So we are dealing more with a ritual here than with vengeance or anger or something like that. And you understand that these depictions could be, in fact, almost racist because it supposed anger and viciousness in the part of the native people. And but okay, that's the problem of Jeffrey. But you see again that you have the problem of representing passions or emotion when you deal with history. And then I want to finish my presentation with a modern example. I says I did it many times. You remember I proposed photography or things like that. And I says, well, the theme of emotion today is not completely absent since Bill Viola was doing it and others. And I thought of a Canadian painter or photographer that could do that. And I must say that I discovered this year, because I didn't know his work at all, the work of a photographer was called Donegan Cumming. I don't know if you have seen his work, in which he made 2 huge panels. I will show you one. That one is called Prologue, and the other is called Epilogue. And it's 205, so it's a very, it's a recent work, if you want. So it's a huge panel that about, you see the dimension, 2.5 meter high by 4 meter long, in which he glued some of his photo, you can see a man lying there on the left and a little dog. But if you look on the right side, you will have thousands of pictures of his own studio, if you want. Things that he took individually. And now he says, I wanted to clean my studio, and I decided to make a kind of collage with all these faces that I photographed for many years. And he says, I had to find a way to compose my collage, if you want. I had to find a certain way to how to dispose it. And he says, I was very enthusiastic to apply a scheme of composition from Bruegel the Older. And the painting he had in mind is this one, in which you see, it's called The Suicide of Saul, because you have a little scene on the left there where, according to the Bible, the king Saul have, during a battle with a Philistine, the battle is supposed to happen on the Mount Gilboa. I've seen the Gilboa. I could guarantee you that Bruegel never saw it. Because all these fir trees, they have nothing to do with the landscape in Israel. And the Gilboa Mountains, I thought, wow, it would be fantastic. It's a little hill. It's smaller than the Mont Royal. Anyway, so Bruegel was not there, but who cares? And he made this scene on the left where, according to the Bible, Saul discovered that he was losing that battle, that 3 of his sons are being killed already, and he asked his armor bearer, you see him beside him, to kill him. He says, this guy was hesitating to do that. After all, it is his king, and he didn't want to be the one who really killed the king. And Saul decided to kill himself at that moment, and that's why we call it the suicide of Saul. And so what Cumming did, he used the whole more or less the same composition. If I go back to his prologue, you will see it's more or less the same composition, but of course with completely different things. For instance, the legs were there, who correspond to the fir tree in the painting. So we asked him why you put legs that way. He says, I wanted something godly there. I want God to be present in a certain way. So there's a huge presence of these legs. You could imagine a big personage. And on the left, it is a kind of transposition of the suicide of Saul, since you have a guy lying on the ground, and near him, well, not his armor bearer, but a little dog. And then when you go to the picture where at the source of this, you will find suddenly, for instance, I show you a little bit closer, the relation that you want to put between the two. There's one vertical personage and one horizontal. With time, we get detached from the subject matter of the Bruegel picture, of course. He kept only the idea of how to compose this, how to organize this collage. So the man lying on his belly there with a spot of yellow will be like a transposition of Saul, and his armor bearer becomes a dog. But then when you look at the picture that he did individually, where this was cut out and then glued, you have the surprise to find the dog. You know, it's a picture that he did in an incredible place. The problem with Cumming, we always ask him, how did you find these people, you know? Look at the taste of this lady here with this decoration, and even on the wall to have a photo of a baby seal with a big cross above it. I find it marvelous. I think that these people have a kind of very, very strange imagination. And the guy is obsessed with his dog, always making jump all the time. He wanted to have a photograph of that. So apparently what Cumming does, he says that, these people, they are around us. You see them all the time. They are these beggars that we find on the street. And he says to them, okay, I can give you 25 cents, but if you want to pose for me in a studio, I could give you $20. So well, perfect. Okay, on arrête de quai, on s'en va avec Cummings. And then that's the way he proceeds, and he gets faces absolutely extraordinary, or enter in places like that you will never even imagine that they exist. And He also, this is another detail of the same picture, of the same big picture that I was showing at the beginning of the prologue. He have used also to glue these images encaustic. What you see, the yellowish, it's wax, in fact. And so it gave a kind of relief to that also. And instead of just using glue flat like this, it gave also a kind of dimension, a third dimension that make it more interesting. And you see on the top there, little personages, one beside the other. They all come from different photos that he took on many years, and they are glued and they are placed there. This one is another corner of the same thing, but it was really like crazy. You realize that the transposition of the lances that we saw in the Bruegel picture are now like legs of how many personages that he photographed on years and years. And in the middle, you have faces, little faces, one beside the other, filling the whole space there. Right? Yeah, it's really like if you use your all work as a photographer, say, of your all your career, and you make a kind of general statement from it. The epilogue, another big also presentation like that, who do again the same idea, but you have to imagine the two, one beside the other. Again, it's the same system, except now that the sources of the picture is different. It's not Bruegel, it's a Belgian painter, it's called James Ensor. And it's the famous painting that's called Christ's Entry in Brussels. And okay, this is the picture that he inspired him, if you want, for his composition of the big panel that I just showed you. And Ensor created like this. It's a crowd that is put in perspective. The Christ in this crowd is very hard to see because he is very small and in the middle. You see, he's somewhere here. And all these personages, here there's some big one there, and you will see in the picture of coming, you have a certain inkling of the, see, if I go back to it, you will see the fact that all the personages in the back are like in the Ensor picture, and then you have in front, the more you go closer to us, the bigger they are. So again, it's the same idea. He took the idea for how to compose a complex picture like that, and then to detach himself from the subject matter. His picture doesn't have anything to do with Christ entering, and nor with Brussels, of course. And I show you just two details of this picture by James Ensor that was fascinated by masks and by weird people like this. Of course, it's a very strange and uncomfortable type of painting when you see it for real. It's at now Paul Getty Museum that acquired that, and so in the west of the United States. And but as I tell you, it was like a way. And then when you go to details of the epilogue and you see his picture, you find out what he used. You see which kind of sources. And here, these two guys are believer, of course, of what he holds in his hand. I don't know if you can read it. It's Elvis Swear. See, I'm not very good in chansonette, but I think young people may have heard this song of Elvis Presley. I swear that I will not quit you. I don't know what. Well, anyway, and so he have that in his hand. He's with a friend, and they are concentrating. They love Elvis Presley, of course, evidently. And in the collage, finally, he put a halo around his head. And we asked him, why you do that? Well, he says, for me, these people are like national treasure, and why not to deify them a little bit, see? Of course, it's his world, and he made them like this, and so he replaced the Elvis thing with a heart and things, and make him disappear. Notice then the man who is nearby here, this one. Okay? I'll show the photo of this. It's special a little bit. He's with all dressed up, but he forgot to put his shoes. Huh? And you have a crooked face like this. It's very disturbing a little bit. And again, this is the type of person that you find in the street in a way, and you go. And he lived in a kind of incredible disorder, a total mess. Huh? You have this one, who is also an admirer of Elvis Presley. So you see the album on the table, and he's singing like that, probably imitating him. And he appears in the collage of Coming somewhere here, but upside down. I don't know if you see him, he's there, but upside down. And then this personage here, who is very intense, is also based on a photo of kind of anger, and so he's there on the side like this. A little bit like in the answer picture, you do have importance given to something that happened on the right, and indeed there's an inscription there, Bruxelles adore le Christ, or something like that. Huh? And to leave you with one picture, is again a detail of this big epilogue. You have all these faces and a kind of an amoncellement of them who are glued one beside the other, some of them with halos, like this lady on the left, and showing scar that she has on her belly. And it's kind of an incredible world, but in which, of course, emotion is expressed in every faces there. And the relation that Cummings succeed to do with these people makes that you finally you are touched by them. It's a kind of a very strange world, but on the other hand, it's like he says, the world is around us. And so finally, my conclusion will be that emotion is not a theme that have completely disappeared from modern art. In the contrary, you will find it, especially in photographer, of course, and it will continue like this. Huh? So for me, it's the last lecture. For you, it's just for the student here, you are in the middle, suffer a little bit more, and there will be holidays. And for the general public here, I want to thank you for your good attention. It was fun to do. Yeah.